The emotional burden of the steamer. Let's go back and visit your steamer with the children. Vanya, the word, steamer, made her uneasy, for it was linked to her traumatic past. Nevertheless, she was willing to board Edgar's steamer. She linked arms with him. On his other side, Electra held his hand, and they returned to Tessa's vessel. Impressive world you live in, Tessa, Stella remarked respectfully. Yes, it is impressive and unique. And you, your entire clan, are the only ones who have been granted unrestricted access. You all have this key. Your children and Vanya will receive it today. Tessa turned to Vanya, sharpening her telepathic senses. Vanya, are you all right? I sensed your vibration over Edgar's steamer. Yes, Tessa. I'm fine. But as you know, a ship like this is connected to mine and my daughters. Vanya couldn't finish the sentence. The memory of the escape and the beginning was too painful. I know your story, Vanya. I also know your story and the Allen's story. You are their daughter, and your daughter has a father. That's what matters to you, to both of you. Vanya. Tessa spoke these last words with an unusual, liberating clarity that deeply touched Vanya. Come on, let's fly back. The ocean liner of hope. When Vanya saw the ship up close, it was no longer a symbol of escape and fear. It was an elegant, elongated vessel. Its polished hull revealing the effort and love of its restoration. It seemed like a floating home, proudly bearing its history. That long, narrow, black painted hull. The upper deck reminiscent of the Orion. The three old, enormous funnels, left standing. Presumably only to create the illusion that it had once plowed through the oceans of Earth with the power of steam, carrying passengers to distant cities. The wooden deck, shimmering with a silky sheen in the starlight. Two black turbines were mounted upon it, ready to take the leap into space, away from this colony, away from those painful memories. To begin a new life with Electra and his daughter Cheyenne. The same turbines were mounted again on the side of the hull. Edgar had thought of everything and paid meticulous attention to detail. It was, after all, their home on this escape, and he wanted to create a comfortable environment for them, his beloved family, because he didn't know how long they would be away. It was the ship that Edgar had personally restored and rebuilt for Electra and Cheyenne's jump into space. Vanya saw the dedication in every detail. Edgar looked at the assembled group. This, children, isn't just a ship. This is where Isla came back into our lives. This is where we knew we had found a home. It's the beginning of everything we are. He turned to Vanya, whom he held tightly in his arms. Vanya, Electra has found a new beginning here. That's what this steamer represents, new beginnings and refuge. Vanya looked at Electra, who smiled warmly at her. Thank you, Father. Vanya whispered. I understand now. It's a ship of hope. A glimpse into the future. My dear, you've noticed that Astra calls me Papa? Edgar asked Electra, his voice soft. Vanya perked up. Yes, my love, Electra replied. Don't you think they both neglect her enough? Why else would she call me Papa? I can only imagine something like that. Electra answered him. I think so too. They don't challenge her at all. She just drifts along. I think we need to have a serious talk with both of them. From what I see, she's so bright and expresses her feelings. Oh, Edgar. If she were our daughter. Vanya almost choked, thinking it was an invitation for another child. Edgar felt the same way, and Vanya subtly signaled for him to look at her. They both understood each other's look. Instantly. Meanwhile, Electra looked at Edgar with a certain expectation as he kissed her. Astra approached her. Aunt Vanya. It sounded quite official. And everyone pricked up their ears. Would you like to pick me up and be my confidante? Vanya knelt down and picked her up. Yes, of course I would, sweetheart. Astra was so happy to hear this. Vanya held the little girl tightly in her arms. The emotional weight of the steamer, the anxieties of the trials, everything gave way in that moment to the feeling of being needed and loved. She was now officially the familiar of another child in the clan. Observations in the twilight. It was time for bed. Astra was already with Vanya, and now two exhausted mice approached her, Teresa and Charlotte. They were hungry and thirsty. Dinner had already been served, and it was delicious, as everyone agreed. Then it was time to retire to recover from the previous exertions. Vanya couldn't sleep. She left her quarters to walk a little through the dark city, illuminated only by the pale light of the star above. This light was particularly visible in the hangar. Curious. She walked toward the light and saw three small figures running toward Nova's vessel. She just managed to hide behind a pillar. She had to observe this more closely. Her premonition was confirmed. Here were three mice, moving silently toward Nova's vessel. Unmistakable. Astra was bringing up the rear. She smiled as the three of them ran up the ramp to disappear into the belly of the vessel. Were they planning to make a run for it? A night flight over Eventide? Vanya followed them on silent feet. No, they weren't trying to escape. They just wanted to sleep in their fur-lined quarters. She saw Astra crawl inside to find her spot. It only took a moment, and then nothing moved. Vanya was pleased with this stealthy observation and left the hangar to continue her walk through Eventide. A little further on, she saw a dark figure emerge from one of the alleys and head towards the edge of the city. She followed. The figure walked towards the battlefield, knelt down, and, lost in thought, let the dust of battle trickle through its fingers. Then the figure stood up and made a beeline for the steamer. It must be Edgar, she thought, and rightly so. Vanya was right. Edgar stood before this enormous, elegant ocean liner, placed his hand on the hull, and gazed up. In the starlight, his steamer shone with a particularly mystical glow. He then ascended the gangway and disappeared into the darkness of the ship. At first, she wanted to follow him, but instead sat on a small pillar to continue watching. Then he reappeared, now clearly recognizable as Edgar, on the deck of the steamer and looked down into the depths. He walked past the turbines and entered the converted bridge. Vanya had an image in her mind. He was gazing at this lifeless landscape, the sea, the rudder firmly in his hands, scrutinizing the apparent ocean before him, searching for a harbor for himself and his family. It was the anchor of hope he had been back in space, and which he still embodied for them all today. She watched as he slowly removed his hands from the rudder and pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the porthole, which looked out onto the battlefield before him. It wasn't fear he radiated, but the immense burden of responsibility. His thoughts were consumed by the Odyssey, the escape, the worry for Electra and Cheyenne, the captain and his angel. He left the bridge again and went to the foredeck. He stood bracing himself against the railing, watching with satisfaction as the steamer made its way through the ocean. The water of its bow waves splashing up on either side, heading towards its unknown destination. Then he turned and walked slowly to the stern of the steamer. There he watched the foamy turns of the propellers churning the water, leaving the churning sea behind him, moving away from the place they had fled and never wanted to return to. Leaving mile after mile behind, just away from there. Edgar had spotted Vanya. He saw her, illuminated for a moment by the starlight, then disappearing back into the shadows. He left the steamer as he had come. He strode across the battlefield and vanished into the darkness of the alleys of Eventide. She didn't hear him coming, for the images in her mind held her spellbound. Come, my daughter, my sweet, let's go back. She was so startled she thought her heart would leave her. He hugged her tightly. "It's all right, my angel. It's okay that you saw me. I imagine you saw me as the captain of that steamer." "Yes, Father, that's exactly it. Your escape across the endless sea." "Yes, it was." Arm in arm, they walked back, silent in their thoughts, through the corridors of Eventide. Electra, however, knew where he would go when the place by her side felt cold. Today, exceptionally, he had returned with his daughter. Comfort after watch time. "There you are again, my love. The place by my side is still empty, and now it's cold. Climb in and warm me." Edgar was happy to oblige. He slipped under the covers and pulled Electra close. "On the way, I met Vanya, who apparently couldn't sleep. Do you know where our mice spend their nights?" She watched them disappear into their furry burrows on the orbit's eye to sleep, he said, chuckling softly. "And where have you been, Captain? Someone has to steer the steamer to its destination." Vanya vividly described what she saw when I boarded this giant to take the helm. "It was true, because I was at sea, love. And it was liberating. Then come, my captain, into my arms." "Which aren't liberating," she whispered, as she usually did. He grinned, and they surrendered to each other. Farewell to the twilight. Tessa woke the mice aboard the Orbit's eye. "Now back to your beds before everyone wakes up." She grinned with amusement as the three of them made their way back to their own beds. Tessa helped Astra, since her legs were still a bit shorter than Thal'Zar and Charlotte's. Astra giggled with delight. She had experienced so much fun and joy here. It would hurt to have to go back, but the longer they stay, the more the star exerts its influence on their inner selves. They ate their breakfast together and brought their luggage aboard the vessel. Electra and Edgar had also been able to experience many things that hadn't been included in previous visits. Tessa appeared. "You can't leave yet." "I still owe the mice a sightseeing flight." The little ones nodded expectantly, their eyes wide. "Good, that gives us a little more time to talk to Solana and the others," said Edgar, who knew the briefing on the rescue mission was now officially postponed. "All aboard, you little mice," Tessa instructed the children, who cautiously entered the unfamiliar vessel and sat by the windows. Tessa made sure they were securely strapped into their seats. The shuttle silently began to move and came to a stop in front of the hangar door. "Right, kids, the universe has just taken us by the hand. Here we go." The hangar door slid open silently. The darkness of space and the starlight flooded the hangar, casting a strange pattern on the floor and walls. They flew in a wide arc around the city, out to the river, over barren plains and dusty deserts. "Who wants to go back aboard the steamer your father left here?" "Me," came the unanimous reply. Tessa gently set the vessel alighting at the gangway of the ocean liner. 8 figures disembarked. Astra didn't have to walk, she was carried, which she clearly enjoyed. On board, Thal'Zar realized that this was the steamer that had brought her parents here. She ran her hands over the metal of the engines, the wood of the superstructure. Tessa took her to the cabin that had been home to her father, mother, and sister. It was still just as they had left the steamer. The curtains her mother sewed, the pictures she and Cheyenne painted. Their bedrooms, the living room, Edgar's workshop, which still smelled of oil and iron. The description of the cozy interior of the steamer. They all stepped inside Edgar's steamer on Eventide, and were immediately enveloped by an atmosphere of profound coziness and warmth. The room breathed history, yet was lovingly maintained. The portholes let in a soft, muted light filtered through the curtains, which Electra had once sewn herself. Their fabric was soft and featured subtle patterns reminiscent of flowers or gentle waves. Hanging all over the walls were numerous paintings by Electra and Cheyenne, which gave the room a very personal and artistic touch. They were portraits, landscapes of distant shores, or abstract symphonies of color that spoke from their souls. In one corner, in a particularly well-lit area, stood an easel. On it rested a painting that Electra had begun but left unfinished. The colors were fresh and vibrant, and one could feel the energy of her final brushstrokes. Beneath the portholes, which resembled round windows to the world, stood a comfortable sofa upholstered in dark red velvet. It practically begged you to sink into it and listen to the gentle rocking of the steamer. A sideboard, also positioned beneath a porthole, was crafted from dark, polished wood and displayed nautical decorations and a collection of antique books. The other furnishings in the living room of the ancient steamer were all impeccably maintained and exuded a timeless elegance that perfectly suited Electra's home on the water. It was a place filled with memories and quiet beauty, a journey into the past. The visitors, all of Electra and Edgar's daughters, including Shala'e and Astra, stood in the living room of the silent ocean liner. Theresa gently stroked the table. When her hand touched the teapot, the energy of the room shifted instantly into a warmth imbued with love. Even Shala'e sensed the change, and everyone fell silent. Suddenly, like ghosts, Electra appeared, took the teapot, and poured the tea into the 2 cups on the table. Then she looked toward the door. Her face began to glow. The tea in the cups steamed. Edgar appeared in the room, beaming with joy. In his arms, he carried little Cheyenne, who saw her mother and, still a little sleepy, wanted to go to her. Electra opened her arms, and Edgar handed her over. They shared a deep kiss. Cheyenne, the observer, now a young woman, put her hand to her mouth, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Ayla took her hand and held it tight. In that moment, everyone knew and understood who their parents truly were and what fate they had endured. Theresa also had tears in her eyes. All the stories they had been told at bedtime were true. Shala'e, not yet an Elyari, understood what was happening. Astra, the aspiring primus solis, was speechless. Electra and Edgar sat down on the couch and let little Cheyenne play on the floor. Each of the girls carefully took a step back so little Cheyenne could crawl. Cheyenne, now grown up, had many years of distance from that steamer, that home, that event. Only now did she truly understand what her parents had been through. Electra and Edgar drank their tea, and the film began to fade. Only the empty teapot and 2 empty cups remained on the table. That warm atmosphere gave way again to that cold, lifeless one before Theresa touched the teapot. Cheyenne was still weeping bitterly. They were tears of understanding, not grief, for what her parents had given up for her and for all their subsequent children. Ayla had hardly any memories of her life with Edgar and her mother, for she had been torn from her home far too soon. Abducted. Thus, only Cheyenne had been able to experience those memories. It must have been a wonderful time for her, Theresa remarked, lost in thought. I think it was, Tessa replied. It was the beginning of your life, of the family you are today. It wasn't luxurious like on the Orion. It was simple, something they have maintained to this day. It was comfortable and cozy, radiating warmth, even now. Your father and mother left everything behind to begin a new life, one that includes your big sister Ayla. Cherish their memory, honor the memory, for it will never return, Tessa added, her final, poignant words. Ayla still held Cheyenne's hand and led her off the steamer. Everyone else followed, their minds deeply moved. The usually lively mice were silent, profoundly affected by what they saw and felt. Let's go, mice. Walking down the gangway wasn't so easy with short legs. They returned safely. The farewell was imminent.